So we want to mill this down, and I was kind of racking my brain on a few different ways to do it. First of all, we're going to be using the bandsaw. Freehand in this case isn't really going to cut it because we want these milled edges to be as straight as possible. We know we're not going to get a perfect edge from the bandsaw blade, but keeping things flat and straight is important for, you know, consistency of the thickness of the pieces we're going to end up with. So also, in the spirit of using scrap, we're just going to take this nasty piece and rip off part of it because its thickness was perfect for setting in the slot. And before too many people out there comment that plywood in this way is the worst thing you could use to make for a little miter slot piece, that's okay. This is not a permanent sled. We're just going to use this a few times and then probably pitch it. So I was alright with that. So let's go ahead and attach it. If you haven't used this technique before, you don't want the bottom of this slotted piece adding extra friction against the bottom of the slot. You want it elevated just a little bit. So as you can see, I cut it just below, just barely less than the depth of the entire slot. So when you glue it in place, something of some thickness, here I've got a few pennies. Luckily I picked up some coffee on the way over this morning, so I had some change in my pocket. So you put those in place, set it on top, and now the top of my slot, my slot piece, is just above the surface. Ugly sled test. Okay, so we have a working sled. Is it perfect? Not necessarily. Is it pretty? No, but it's gonna get the job done for what we want to do. I've got a log from a tree that was recently cut down in my backyard. Tune in for more stuff about that. But right now we want to mill this puppy. So here's how the sled's gonna work. The first cut that we want to make on this guy, when you mount it to the sled, we need the outer part to be at least 1 inch and then some away from this edge in order to get a nice flat cut first. So that's what we're gonna do. So it's important to use a countersink, or at least bury the head of the screw to the surface of your sled or higher, because the last thing we want is some kind of obstruction scratching against our brand new table of the bandsaw. Here goes nothing. Nice! So that went really, really well. The face quality, as you can see, this is about what you can expect from such a wide blade and such a hefty cut, is you're gonna get these blade marks throughout. And that's okay, because this is just rough milled lumber. The important thing is that we have a nice flat face. So I think what we're gonna do as our process is take this off the sled, mount the flat side down with about as much exposed that's going to get cut off, and essentially we're using this kind of like a joiner. We're going to have 2 flat faces, and then that one will register against the table, the others will register against the fence. Then we don't need our sled anymore, and we can just mill out our 1 inch thick or however thick boards that we want. Round 2,
fight!
Round 2, fight!
Oh, baby. So our sled ended up working pretty great. 2 nice flat sides, and our next step will be to use the larger flat side against the table, the smaller flat side against the fence. We're going to set the fence at its set distance, so as we pass through, we get consistent thicknesses. Okay, here we go. So excited. Get the hell out of here. This is so freaking cool. You ready? Watch this.
That's great.
Ah.
So after all is said and done, I'd say this was a pretty successful experiment. The final step was to seal the ends to try and slow the drying process and make the boards dry more evenly, and in just under a year we'll have some usable lumber. We do a lot of CNC projects around here, so in my eyes I see some pretty good little boards for some rustic live edge signs, maybe even some floating shelves. And here, if you align the pieces correctly together, they sort of serve as almost a book match for some matching grain. Who knows what this piece could end up being? Maybe a tiny end table or a small bench? The sky's the limit when you make your own lumber, so I'm pretty excited to get to work on some of this stuff. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.
Ooh. Oh. Ooh. Oh.
Round 2, fight!